So just a note about today's event and focus on climate. As everyone knows, it's pretty dry. It's been dry since last year, and we're continuing to experience dry weather. That precipitated the thought of really focusing on climate for the whole day for today's source water protection event, because of the need to preserve the availability and work efficiently to preserve our resources, our drinking water resources. We still remain well below normal levels for groundwater levels as well as stream flow, and we continue to be in that position. So doing all we can do to protect the availability of drinking water in our state seems to be an important issue that we may continue to experience, especially if things continue to be dry over the course of the spring and into the summer. Just a couple of notables before I pass it on to Bob. Excuse me, on to Commissioner. We've, over the last year or so, we've had a couple of significant things, including changes in the Farm Bill, in the 2018 Farm Bill, that now makes source water protection a priority as part of the soil and water programs that NRCS administers. What that means in practical terms is approximately 10% of their conservation funding nationally, which amounts to about $6 billion per year, is now going to be targeted towards source water protection watersheds to improve the quality of source water and reduce potential threats to community water systems and their customers. That's a big policy change, and it will result in more resources being devoted in source water protection watersheds. With regards to land conservation, the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund continues to make funds available for conserving critical water supply lands. This year, there will be $2 million available, and eligibility applications will be available in June. In addition, there'll be $6.8 million that will be coming to New Hampshire under the RCP, or Regional Conservation Partnership Program. That's also funding from NRCS. We'll talk a little bit more about that around noon at our awards. Also, we continue to provide funding for local source water protection implementation projects, and we've awarded $400,000 over the last 2 years to do that. Many of those projects go to improve local protection, including zoning changes, removal of tanks, such as deficient tanks at mobile home parks, or pay for additional security at water supplies at sources to protect them from a variety of security issues. Lastly, we've been completing a statewide risk assessment related to spills. This stems out of a major spill that happened in 2014 in West Virginia, and what EPA has been sponsoring an analysis, an inventory and analysis of threats to our surface water sources. And we plan to have some deliverables and products for public water systems to be able to look at those that use surface water that will be available and helpful for adding to emergency plans and risk assessments under that are for those requirements that are due for public water systems this June. Okay, so without further delay, I'd like to introduce Bob Scott. Commissioner Scott was sworn in on June of 2017. He previously served as Commissioner of the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission since 2012. Before that, Commissioner Scott worked for New Hampshire DES for a total of 17 years in the Air Resources Division, eventually serving as the director of that division from 2003 to 2012. Commissioner Scott currently serves as the Board of Directors of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI. As Public Utilities Commissioner, he served as the Board of Directors of the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners and was a member of the Committee on Critical Infrastructure, as well as the Committee of Environment, Energy Resources and the Environment. Commissioner Scott's going to open up with a few remarks regarding our event today. Unfortunately, his webcam is not working, so we're just going to be able to hear Commissioner Scott today, and I think he's ready to go. So I'll pass it over to Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Pierce. Can everybody hear me, or Pierce, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right, thank you. And as Pierce mentioned, one of the many challenges of being remote. Unfortunately, I'm in the office, and you would have thought that would give me a better chance to have fully functioning video here for you, but probably for the best. So first of all, again, I'm Bob Scott, Commissioner with DES. Thanks for the kind intro, Piers. I want to welcome everybody to the Department's Source Water Protection Conference. It's nice to see a strong turnout. We have 101 folks on at the moment. And I look forward to an in-person conference next year to actually to meet with you if I haven't seen you before. So moving into some of the things I wanted to cover, obviously, in addition to the normal challenges caused by competing pressures of land use, we're increasingly seeing other issues that impact potential sources of drinking water. And that's really why this two-day conference, I think, is timely. So obviously, we'll be talking about understanding the climate impacts to drinking water sources, source water protection, public health, and public education. These are all important elements, obviously, in assuring that we have access to clean, safe water resources. Having gone through COVID-19 over the past year, it shouldn't take much imagination to understand that extreme things can happen and will happen, and the importance of protecting these types of critical resources. As many of you are aware, and Pierce mentioned, we've been experiencing warmer and shorter winters, longer periods of high temperatures in the summer, and more extreme weather events in general. Many of you attending have already, we really have an appreciation already of the changing climate and how it's impacting. How's that for audio? Thank you. Again, more technical issues here. More to the point, given our lack of snow melt this year, there's a high probability that we're entering into yet another year of a multi-year drought. Our Water Division Director, Tom O'Donovan, will be discussing that in more detail at your noontime discussion. Last year, the department was able to provide assistance to a number of public water systems and private residences as they cope with increased water demand and reduced availability. Unless the current drought conditions change for the better, the impacts on water systems will certainly be more pronounced this year. So we're hoping for more rain, and we'll see what happens. It's also clear we're seeing more intense weather events with the associated negative consequences, particularly on our infrastructure. Public water supply wells and treatment plants are certainly vulnerable to these impacts. We've seen Plymouth, North Conway, and Somersworth, for example, have unfortunately experienced significant flooding events that have inundated the drinking water infrastructure and disrupted their operations. Our lakes and rivers, as you well know, are our primary source of drinking water for many of the large communities. That's a trend. And this includes Manchester, Nashua, Concord, and Rochester are increasingly looking at those resources. As we see a trend towards drier and warmer conditions, this will slow lake turnover rates, reduce in-stream flow, and increase source water temperatures. And under those conditions, aquatic plants and algae tend to flourish, increasing water quality concerns and safety concerns, as well as adding the complexity and the cost of water treatment. So your jobs don't get any easier. Another important impactful consideration for water supply availability is water contamination. New Hampshire has always been subject to natural water contamination, for instance, from arsenic and radon, as you know. For many decades, we've grappled with man-made contamination from industrial sources. The gasoline additive MTBE is a great example. And of late, as measuring technologies has progressed, we're now seeing Pfas, for instance, as ubiquitous throughout the state. This contamination complicates the availability of drinking water sources. And as new contamination is discovered, it drives home the need for backup water supplies and contingency plans. On top of these concerns, development, of course, and population increases put stress on water supplies. In short, these stressors are forcing public water systems and communities to resort for more expensive and unpopular management strategies, including purchasing of water potentially, extending water use restrictions, as we see during the droughts, and searching for other alternatives, including finding new sources. This drives the the use of supplies not recently used. For instance, the Merrimack River, as I alluded to, is increasingly being looked at as a source of water supply. And with all that, stating the obvious, it's even more important to protect our sources of water as in the important assets they are. Dealing with these issues, increased drought, flooding, more severe weather, contamination, general water availability is a challenge that really requires thoughtful planning to limit the impacts we experience now and expect in the future. This includes the design of infrastructure as well as projections for water demands. DES continues, and we hope to be a key partner in offering technical and financial assistance to reduce these impacts. The Drinking Water Groundwater Bureau offers a number of grants that support resiliency to include asset management, leak detection, and community water conservation measures and solutions. All this again points to a need to emphasize planning and ensuring water resources are protected. The good news to this story is that we have some funding tools to assist. I still find myself in amazement that here in New Hampshire, I can say we have some money to help, and I'm happy for that. So in addition to the update that Pierce just gave, we obviously have our drinking water, drinking water and clean water state revolving loan funds, which continue to be a mainstay. We hear a lot from Congress of late. We're hearing there's perhaps even a desire to increase the SRF allocations by almost double, perhaps. Probably more to the on point today, our source water protection grants. We have a allocation from the annually from the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund for that. We use state revolving loan set aside funds for source water protection. And as I mentioned, the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund, we do loans and grants for infrastructure as well. We now have a Pfas contamination loan fund to help address those issues. And we were allocated last biennium $50 million in bonding capacity. And probably the big thing going on right now is we're expecting some amount of infrastructure funds, likely in hundreds of millions of dollars, through the ARPA, the American Relief Plan, and possibly again, there's a lot of talk in Congress about a Federal Infrastructure Act also. So there's a lot more to come. We expect that's funding through the state, likely through this agency, but we also expect similar funds through the municipalities directly, and then potentially congressional earmarks. So again, my message here is good planning. The best way to hedge against these issues, and particularly to access these new federal funds, is to have a plan. What your system needs and vulnerabilities. What do you need to do and when? What's your funding plan? How do you best leverage available funds? And how do you position your system or your concerns to be most competitive? As you're aware, we need to work together to ensure drinking water is always safe and available. And how do we do that with these concerns? It's by developing multiple and diverse water supplies, creating backup supplies, expanding emergency connections in water storage, and preserving the availability of the capacity we do have by controlling for water loss from mains and tanks and promoting wise use by the public. So there are a number of important issues we'll discuss tomorrow as well, but one of them, as I look at the agenda, is again, the public exposure to contaminants and how they perceive that, and that really ties very closely, and in my eyes, to public education. That's an important thing for everything we do. We need community buy-in to have workable solutions, not only for source water protection, but water conservation. And I talked about the planning, just even bearing the costs associated with proper planning, and certainly to support the needed investments to spend money wisely. So the public and the ratepayer really need to understand why these investments are important and why certain activities need to be supported. On the topic of education, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the importance of the preservation of wetlands and forests, erosion control, stormwater management, and proper waste management, and the protection of sources of water. These are all core functions of the Department of Environmental Services, and support for our public support for our mission is an important consideration. So we all need to work together. So my bottom line here is, while there are many challenges, DES is here to help, and by sharing amongst ourselves, I think we can better prepare for the challenges ahead. While I have the floor, I do want to recognize all the great staff at DES, particularly the people who have worked together to put this on. In particular, I'd like to recognize two people. Given COVID, we haven't had a lot of public venues to talk in some cases. So the first one I'd like to briefly talk about is Sarah Pillsbury. Many of you will remember her as the administrator of the Drinking Water Groundwater Bureau. She retired over the summer. Early in her career, Sarah was pivotal in recognizing the need for a state groundwater protection program and developing the state's first groundwater protection strategy nearly 30 years ago. So she was very, very young then. She oversaw the development of that program, including the state's water supply land protection program, which helped to permanently protect over 5,600 acres of water supply land. So she leaves a great legacy. As administrator of the Bureau, she's had to address, obviously, like many of you, aging infrastructure, limiting funding for infrastructure, and aging water supply workforce, and myriad of issues, including the issue of lead lines, service lines, and a lot of the contamination issues I've talked about. She also stood out, and still does, as a leader among state drinking water program managers. She was took leadership roles in the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators and the Groundwater Protection Council, and she's developed and trained and mentored many DS employees in many respects, including myself. So, and of late, I'm pleased to announce, she also was able, on her retirement, she received a Lifetime Achievement Award for Environmental Merit from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And through the New England Water Works Association, she also received the George Fuller Award, as well as the Jerome Healy Award, as well as the Granite State Rural Water Association's Broadbent Lifetime Service Award. So I say all that to say we suffered quite a loss with her retirement. We have Brendan Kernan now, has taken on her role, and we wish him all the best. There's a lot going on, and we really appreciate all that Sarah had done. And finally, as I'll wrap up here, I also want to recognize your lunchtime speaker, our Water Division Director, Tom O'Donovan. He's retiring at the end of this month. He's spent a life in public service, and he's really added a lot of energy to our water programs here at the state of New Hampshire, and he will be greatly missed. So I really want to wish him well in his retirement. He'll be not only missed by the department, but I think his efforts for the community as a whole are going to be greatly missed. One of the many marks he left was we were able to, he was very passionate about, as he should, about arsenic and the concerns we have for private residential wells with arsenic. And he led the charge to create a program for pitchers for low-income pregnant mothers to help filter the arsenic and provide a resource for them to limit that exposure. So that was really groundbreaking, and we're still watching that program grow. So thank you, Tom, for that. And lastly, I want to put in my shameless plug. I talk about retirements. We are hiring. So not only for Tom's position, for instance, but all through the agency, we are in a mode now where we're posting positions. We all know that there's a lot of great people here, but we'd like to make our team even better. So if you are interested or know somebody who's interested, please give us a call. I'd love to talk about it. So bottom line is, thanks for attending and contributing. And thank you for your interest in drinking water protection. I trust the conference will be of value to you, and as always, we really appreciate your input. So thank you.